Looks like it's golden. Awesome. So, thank you for joining us, whether you're watching live or you're watching later on the YouTube. Welcome to Grim Podcast Perilous Adventure presents our unofficial, and make sure that's really clear, unofficial first impressions and review of the Imperial Zoo. I am, of course, your bad GM, Dan. And joining me is friend of the network and just all-around awesome guy, super fan, Adam Dagna. How you doing, Adam?
Nice. I'm doing good. Doing real good. Yeah.
So real quick, let's just start with the immediate first impressions flipping through this book, or I guess scrolling through this book.
Right.
Unfortunately, I was just double checking before we started. It's not slated until a Q4 release for 2022, which makes me big sad. But this PDF, my first impression is it's awesome. I love it. This is not exactly what I thought it was going to be, but we'll talk about why I still think it's great.
Yeah, I totally agree. I was expecting something different, but not disappointed in what I got.
That's how I feel about it. So I was expecting, we didn't know much about it until like 2 days before it came out, where they gave us some idea of some things that were happening in the book, but I thought it was going to be more about like the actual literal Imperial Zoo in Altdorf and like what was there, and use that as a lens to see different monsters of the Warhammer world. That's not this at all. The Imperial Zoo has one little box out, which is cool information, but the format of this is set up as almost like a campaign that you could play, where a character, not Theo, he goes by Schreiber,
Right.
has been hired by the Imperial Zoo to go collect information, bring back some specimens to put on display, and these are his writings while on this adventure. And I was like, okay, I like that. It was reminiscent of the Old World Bestiary from second edition. That was all like one guy going around collecting information, talking with different people about things, and having like, their opinions of it. And then there was like regular text that was like, okay, this is what it's really like, and then the stat block. So this was made me think of that, where it was very immersive, very in-world.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I thought the very first thing, like out of the gate, pretty much in the book, he says that the the Imperial Zoo burned the copy of the book that he produced for them. Like this is all basically classified information they don't want out.
Right. I love the
Yeah.
story that they tell throughout the whole thing. It's super cool, where Theo had this job, and then when he delivered, says they printed 300 copies of it, and then the witch hunters were like, no, burn it.
Nope.
Which
Right.
is like, oh. So what this book is supposed to be, what you're reading, especially if you get the collector's edition, which is supposed to be like the literal journal that he made, is more of like kind of like self-published. It's not published by like the colleges, the University of Altdorf, or anything like that. He had a noble print it for him, so it's much harder for the witch hunters to get rid of. And that's supposed to be what we are reading in this book. I think it's a really cool concept. I like it. It's not dry. I love reading bestiaries for other games, just because reading about cool monsters is cool. But I love how this is set up to be a story, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a bunch of different characters throughout. So very cool stuff.
Yeah,
Looks like
for sure.
Bastion's in the chat. Hello, Bastion.
Hey, what's up?
But yeah, I'm a big fan of this format. I think they nailed it. What's cool is that not only do we have Schreiber's thoughts as he's going around the world. So I got a hair stuck in my gums. That was really weird. As he's going around collecting information about these monsters, he's with a party of adventurers. We have an Ostland, who's really more like a Kislevite pit fighter. We've got a wood elf hunter. We got a dwarf alchemist, a noble artist, and a jade wizard traveling along with them to make sure they all survive the trip. Which,
Mm-hmm.
talking about monsters of the old world, it's going to be dangerous. So I love throughout the book, most pages have little snippets from the different characters. So you get
Right.
to know them as well. It's telling the story. And I really appreciated that with their different personality, their different handwriting, which was really fun to see.
I think that was probably one of the most like unexpected things about this book was that there are pre-gen characters in the back. Each of the characters that are described in each of these little snippets is an actual character that you can play or an NPC you can put into your campaign. So
And they're really well done. I love that what they do with pre-gens, where they have like secrets that you can pick one or more of. You can get some extra experience and whatnot, and they really fill out. So it's not just a stat block that you take over, and obviously you can change it if you want, and just use the stat block. But they're well made characters that have little secrets and little things about them, and a lot of role playing tips, which I was not expecting that at all either.
yeah.
I was kind of hoping for a new career, like a beast tamer type thing, but
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see that.
yeah. But
Yeah.
it's focused on the monsters and the story being told, so I'm
Sure.
okay with what it had there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I also wanted to talk about the artwork of this book. Besides the awesome cover, I love this artist. I got to double check. I want to make sure to give them proper credit because I forget the name.
That's something I always forget to look at is the name of the actual artist.
Victor Leza, Leza. He's done a bunch of stuff throughout the books, and it's always great. You can immediately tell that it's one of his pieces. His style is pretty. What's the word? It stands out in a good way.
Yeah, it's iconic. Yeah.
The way
Yeah,
he
that
especially
picture on the
faces.
cover, that picture on the cover of the giant is like just that alone, has me wanting to include that as an encounter in a game.
Yeah, because it was part of it was kind of fun to figure out what is the cover referencing in the book. And you find out it's Hela Grunzor the Horrible, the giant.
Yeah.
The book does have a fair bit of original pieces, a lot of things in black and white. The drawings of the artist that's along with them, Eric. Fair bit of recycled work that we see throughout these publications because you already got it. A lot of pieces of
Right.
of Dave Gallagher's, redone from the Storm of Magic book from Warhammer Fantasy Battles, which were they're perfectly fine pieces. There ain't nothing wrong
Yeah.
with using them again, so I didn't mind
Well,
that at
for
all.
anyone sort of out of the loop, like I never played uh, fantasy battles, so to me they were all new pieces. So,
Right? Yeah, if you didn't happen to have that one book, they would all seem new, and then they fit with the new things people make and the old stuff. The styles are close enough that nothing seems super out of place. One of my
for sure.
favorites is the Skin Wolf picture, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
Uh,
one is a great entry in general. So
yeah,
I mean, just that creature is gold to
yeah,
me.
looks
It's
great, and I love how
one
they
of the
fit
best ones.
for sure. And it's something that we've had in Warhammer for a long time, the idea of skin wolves, but there's always been a little like, are they real? Are there really like werewolves in Warhammer? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's actually a couple different kinds. So we
Well,
got
the interesting thing is
that.
the skin wolves are more of like the chaotic version. There's still it seemed to me that there's still actual werewolves, but these are created through the taint of chaos more than they are through the lycanthrope type background.
Right, and I love the play on that, like, it's not so much the full moon that brings out a skin wolf, it's more slib.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Which is like, yeah, and then the skin wolf tears himself out of the inside of the person, and then for the person to come back, they do the same thing and rip their way out of the skin
yeah,
wolf, which is like, oh yes,
right. Yeah, that was an awesome little tidbit.
great story. So yeah, artwork great. I love all the little bits they put along with the text with just little, what do you call it? There's just little things like a helmet or a sword or some fish, just to
Oh
kind of
yeah, the
break up
little
the text.
kind of the sidebar art
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
And
the
I
next.
think in terms of art, I think it can't be understated, at least in the PDF release, how amazing the maps are in the end papers. It's released as a separate PDF.
Oh yeah, I almost
And
forgot to talk about that. The new map of the Empire.
hmm
Whew.
yeah, I was looking at it earlier at like 400% zoom, and it's still nice and clear and beautiful. It's just great.
So good. Trying to find
Okay.
the credit for that. They don't list cartography separate here. Does it have a name on the PDF version of the giant map of the Empire?
That I'm not sure. Let me see if I zoom out here.
I think it's by Blando, but I'm not positive.
I think that's yeah. I think I see it down there on the bottom right by all those little scroll pieces.
Oh, yep, Blando. Yep, he's done all kinds of map work for Cubicle 7, for Wizards of the Coast. I think even for Paizo, all over the place, and his stuff is great. But yeah, this map of the Empire isn't crazy high resolution. You can zoom way in, and it still looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And it lists so many things on here.
And just very like thematic in terms of the terrain, like in the south in the Stirland and Averland, all the farmland is sort of depicted in like these blocked out fields, and just very thematically strong. Like in terms of you can visually look at it and know what's going on in that region.
Yeah, even looking over, like, Stirland is nice and green, and then Sylvania is gray.
Right, I was gonna say even like the color of the forest changes depending on where you're looking.
Yeah,
Which is cool.
did a really nice job with it. I like it a lot. I'm excited to have a whole big map of the Empire. And part of me is a little, I'm not upset, but there's no provincial boundaries drawn. Is there? Are those road? Yeah, those are. I can't tell if those are supposed to be roads or provincial boundaries.
Yeah, I think it's more conceptual. Like they have laid out across the land, like the Grand Duchy of Averland, the Grand County of Stirling. So like you can sort of see visually where it is, but it's not. Yeah, it's not like a big red line where the dividing line is. So,
Right. And that
which I think is okay.
I'm okay with it. Most of the boundaries in the Empire are rivers anyway.
Right. Exactly.
Not all of them, but a lot. So, like, it doesn't have those big lines to say this is this county, this is this province, whatever. That's okay. It's a gorgeous map. I'm going to use it a lot
Oh yeah, yeah.
to make sure I have it loaded up on my Foundry somehow.
Right.
I saw in the Facebook post to promote the stream, somebody asked if there was going to be a Foundry module coming for this. I think they may have thought we were Cubicle 7, and I was like, I don't know. I'm going to assume so. I would like to.
Based on just like the amazing release schedule they have had for Foundry, it's inevitable.
Yeah. We just got the Altdorf book on Foundry just like this last week or something, so I'm assuming this will come eventually. If the book's not due out until Q4, I would assume that we won't get the Foundry module this year, but maybe? I feel like did we get the Middenheim one before the Middenheim book actually released? I'm not really sure. I can't remember.
I think we're almost concurrent release. I thought like
those
within months maybe.
Pretty close, yeah. So I'm going to assume we'll get a Foundry module for this. I hope so, just to have those monsters in there and icon tokens and everything. I'm getting more and more familiar with Foundry as we use it for Gapapa, but there's still so many features that I know I don't take advantage of that are awesome.
And then the beautiful thing of Foundry is that there's third-party modules that you can add in to even add more functionality.
Yeah.
Standards. I can't recommend Foundry enough.
Oh, absolutely.
An online platform. There's a bit of a learning curve, but once you learn it, it does everything for you.
Yeah, and once you get the couple basics down, I use it almost exclusively just for maps and battle maps while we play. Other than that,
yeah, I pretty much exclusively use it for actually online playing, and it's I play on both Roll20 and Foundry, and vastly prefer Foundry. Although both work well. With the
Foundry's just so pretty.
It is, yeah, for sure.
We'll circle back around to the Imperial Zoo. I want to talk about a couple major new things they added for monsters that, as GMs, we are excited for. New monster traits. So let's talk about the boring one first, Burrow.
Okay.
Which is just, they have like a burrow speed. They can move underground pretty easily. I think they can kind of attack things from underneath. It's cool. It's thematic. it's kind of necessary for a lot of monsters out there.
Right.
It's a thing. It's cool. But Grim,
Oh,
as the
that's a
bad
party killer.
GM, oh, I love Grim.
Grim is potentially a party killer if done without care, I think.
Yeah, so Grim allows a monster to just gain an advantage on their turn equal to the value of Grim. If there's no number given, it's just one, but there are a couple monsters that are Grim 2 or 3, so they can just get advantage. And then, so I like that they did this because with a big monster against a bunch of opponents, it's hard for them to keep any advantage because once they get hit, which is easy, relatively easy to hit them, they
Mhm.
lose their advantage. So they usually don't have advantage going into their turn. So either just get advantage, and then they can breathe fire on you, or whatever they got going
Right.
on, or hit you easier. So
For
I
sure.
love this idea. I haven't had too many monsters on Gapapa yet that need advantage to do stuff, but we played No Strings Attached, and there are creatures in there that have the breath ability, which you can only use if you have advantage. And they're like little tiny things that get destroyed in one hit. So it's like, how are they supposed to get advantage? So I just was like, it breathes once and then it has to get advantage to do it again. Which we saw in some other monsters had that caveat that was like, I think it's trolls. They added that the
Yeah.
first time they vomit, they can just do it, and then they have to spend advantage to do it again,
Right.
which made a
Well,
lot of sense.
I think a lot of people overlook it, but most or many monsters actually the only attack they get is their like weapon attack. Anything like if it's a tail or a two, like if there's claw, like any of those that are outside of just a basic weapon attack require advantage to be spent to use them.
Right.
But they're also like a free attack. So this grim ability allows a monster to get at least a second attack, or if not more, depending on the rating, which I think is crucial, especially with a party, 3, 4, 5 people surrounding a monster. It really needs that extra advantage to be able to take advantage of those extra attacks to not just get pounded to death by sheer numbers.
Now, isn't it something like bite or tentacle? You don't need to spend advantage for that, right? You just get to make more attacks,
No,
unless you're
no,
talking
anything
about
that
breath or
yeah,
vomit.
anything that's not just listed as a weapon trait attack are meant to be used as if I'm unless I'm mistaken, but that's how I remember reading it.
Oh yeah, you're
Any of
right.
those, yeah,
Yeah, so like bite on its turn, a creature may make a free attack by spending one advantage,
right.
and it does that. So I think maybe I did that right in the past because it. I'll never forgive myself for the ghoul that forgot to bite when it had plenty of advantage. Tim
Yeah.
just brought it up in game the other day, and I was like, I'm gonna kill Lucky with a bite from a creature in the future just because.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, I learned that one early on. Like one of my first adventures with my party was against a stir pike, and
Oof.
it doesn't have. I think it only has one attack, but if it hits, then you can do a tails attack or these other attacks, and it's like it was very underwhelming until I read the rules. I was like, oh well, I could have attacked it 2 or even 3 times potentially in a round,
Right.
and it would have been a much bigger threat had I remembered those rules at the time. So yeah.
It's big deal. I was just double
Mm-hmm.
checking there. I got mixed up. Tentacles, you don't have to spend advantage. They're just free attacks for how many tentacles you have. Is different
Okay.
from a bite or tail. So
Mm-hmm.
Big Papa BZ is asking in the chat, why do they have all these like um, claw or tooth listed as a weapon? So the initial one that's like a weapon trait, like weapon claw, that's their like base attack. But if they also have like bite or tail, that's when they can
Mm-hmm.
spend an advantage to do another attack. So Grim allows them, like Dan was saying, to either get more attacks or to spend those really awesome ones like breath or
Mm-hmm.
vomit. So it just makes them more deadly, which these big monsters should be. Like that, you don't want to have to fight a chimera unless it gives you no other choice. So the fact that it can now breathe on you easier, I
Mm-hmm.
like it. I think it's necessary.
Well, in a lot of those bigger monsters, you're getting a plus 40, potentially up to a plus 60 to hit them. So you're guaranteed to hit, and you're with most weapons guaranteed to do 1 damage, which removes its advantage. But if it's getting advantage at the beginning of the turn, no matter what, then it makes it really important for the players to be able to get their attacks in early to try and remove that advantage. Otherwise, it's just going to be nothing.
Right. Yeah. So I'm a huge fan of this. Ooh, my heat just kicked down there. I'm a huge fan of this new talent. I know not everybody out there is going to love it, but I just think it gives monsters more of a chance because once you surround it and get a couple people in contact with it, like yeah, it's going to do some. If it hits you, it's going to do some serious damage. Usually, especially if it's like enormous and it's multiplying its damage multiple times and damaging, but
it's funny. I was giving I was basically doing a homebrew of this to some degree. I was basically giving them one advantage per size category larger that they got. So if they were large, they got one advantage at the beginning of the round, for sizing them. So it's nice to see it as kind of an official thing.
Right. Now I can just say, well, I just gave my monster the Grim talent trait.
Right.
Get over it. I can do that. I'm the GM.
I mean, I could do it before, but now it's legal.
It's a little more palatable. Or it's just like, I don't have to tell you when my monster has advantage.
Right, exactly.
Because I always felt like, especially, the monsters were always at a huge disadvantage in this game because of the advantage system. Where they get hit, they lose their advantage. Like, that's massive. And most monsters only have a weapon skill of like 35 to 55. And if you're playing adventurers with any amount of experience, they're going to have a hard time winning unless you just get lucky with the opposed roll. So even getting plus 10 to that attack is huge.
For sure.
I love it. And not every single monster has it, of course. It's a trait, so it's a lot of them do. But a lot of them are necessary. I did like how many monsters they added to, like, this monster can't be surprised. This monster can't be outnumbered, like the Chimera. It's got multiple heads. It can see you in all directions. You can't outnumber it because it knows where you are.
Sure. Yeah, there's like a two-headed snake creature that also can't be surprised, can't be outnumbered.
Yeah.
Because it's basically assumed to be looking in all directions at all times.
Yeah, I think that's good. Because especially if there's like one big monster, easily outnumbering it and getting like plus 40 to hit just makes it too easy. Then the chat's asking, what point do you consider the party's enjoyment if they aren't just there to be killed? It makes it sound like I'm super bloodthirsty as a GM. I'm not trying to kill characters every encounter, but if you're fighting something like a Chimera, it should be a challenge, and they should be real excited when they survive at the end. Or maybe only lose one person kind of thing.
I think the other thing is these traits encourage players to be more tactical and think in advance. It's not just like, oh, there's a Chimera, let's just run up, surround it, and start hitting it with sticks. Like, if you know that it's gonna, through research or whatever, you've learned that they have these abilities. And I think that's the key here, really, as a GM, is to give your players, not tell them outright, but give them hints that, okay, these things are extremely dangerous, they can attack out of turn or whatever, like through stories given to them by people with experience. And then they think, okay, well, now we have to adjust our tactics. We have to try and trap it, surprise it, or whatever. They have to come up with outside the box things rather than just run up, surround it, outnumber it, kill it.
Right. Because
that's isn't even, I think, that fun for the players. Like that's just. I don't think that's a very interesting encounter necessarily all the time. So.
Right, it just becomes an HP sack, where you're just wailing on it until you do enough damage and hope that it doesn't hit you back. Hope that you keep getting lucky and it doesn't do too much damage back, where being able to at least mitigate the outnumbering advantage. Like, I get if it's a real big monster, it should be relatively easy to hit, and that's why they have a ton of wounds. But it shouldn't just be like, all right, the four of us surround it, even though only two of us are melee fighters, because that way we can give each other more bonuses. Like, it can take you out of it a bit. So just saying this monster can't be outnumbered, so don't even bother, I think will allow people to play more to their character. Like, okay, my archer is going to stand back instead of getting into combat with this thing. My mage is going to stay back instead of hitting it with a stick, because then it gives everybody else plus 40 to hit.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Mr. Runaway Train in the chat says, sorry to ask, but what is this? I've never heard of this. It's like D&D. It is like D&D. So Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a tabletop RPG set in the Warhammer world with its own rule set that I love. It's a D100 system. instead of a D20. And this is their Imperial Zoo, kind of like their bestiary, but there's a whole bunch of story going on with it.
Yeah.
But nice to see you here, Mr. Runaway Train. So next thing I want to talk about is the appendices at the end. After we go through the story of what's happening, after we go through all the entries of the monsters, we have some rules to be able to use around the table. Not just by the GM, but by players as well. We have Gory Riches. All about harvesting monster parts and turning into cool stuff. We're selling it.
Right.
Yes!
It gives the players really kind of a motivation for seeking some of these things out. Like, you'd be crazy to seek some of these things out if there weren't like riches attached, alchemical components, even like for magical item components. It really, if you want that cool magical item, you're gonna have to go track down a cockatrice or something.
Yikes.
So,
yeah, I love this. Where it's one of those things that's kind of been around forever in RPG type things, like, oh, kill this monster for me. But now you can actually do something with the parts. Or just, I love the idea they just have charts for, like, this is how much it can be worth based on the encumbrance of it, which is based on its size, based on its danger level. For, like, is it hazardous or dangerous or super deadly? And what parts might be worth more and how well you can keep it to get it back. They even have rules for it turning gamey or rotten, which is really cool. And it's one of those things that you can use that as much as you want. Like, if you don't want to get that nitty gritty about, like, oh, it's been, too many days, now it's rotten, you don't have to use that. But I love the idea of alchemical stuff, using monster parts to make things. I think that's just awesome, and most players love that idea.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to have a bit of a ticking clock on those things, because it's like, you can't just kill this monster, harvest it, put the stuff in your backpack, and then travel for another 2 weeks and be like, oh yeah, we have that thing in their backpack when you get to town. It's like, okay, well, now you have to start thinking, okay, where's the closest town? How do we get there? How can we get there fast enough?
And the closest town that would buy something like that, too, know what to do with it.
Sure, like, who wants it, and where can we get the best price for it? Like, it brings in a lot of like kind of simple things to the game that wouldn't be there if this type of thing wasn't involved.
And I think it's something that helps to set WFRP apart from other games where, like, in other games you could pick up the monster parts and be like, all right, let's teleport back to town and get rid of it right away, kind of thing. Where, Warhammer is more about the nitty gritty. So it makes perfect sense that they have these rules in here. And I like it. I appreciate it. It's something that we can definitely use, especially on Gapapa, where Lucky's already been doing this. He likes to take parts of things, as a wizard, in quotes.
Yeah.
He's already kind of been doing this. So kind of like how you were saying with how you were already giving monsters advantage, now we have actual rules for the stuff in his wet bag.
Sure. Like, and, when he's taking fingers or eyes and things, it's like, well, how now he can make a check to see how many pieces he actually gets instead of just sort of winging it, which is kind of cool. So.
And then we have new items, magic items, or just items from the pieces of the monster, like the great, I lost what it's called. Not the elk. What's the word I'm looking for?
Oh,
the first monster in the book.
Yeah, let me hang on.
It's a big stag. Deer. Stag, that's the one. The great stag.
Yeah.
You can have a antler-hilted sword. And what I really like about it is that how it affects the weapon that's attached to the hilt depends on how the person got the antler. Like, if they killed the stag to get the antler, they got it through violence, then the sword does bleeding conditions. If you, found a shed antler and used it, then it's not so nasty. I can't find the entry to see what that one does. Where'd it go?
Yeah, where is that page?
Antler-hilted blade. There we go. Alright, if it's acquired by violence, it will always inflict one bleeding condition every time it's used to inflict a critical wound. But if you, found it, then the sword using such a hilt will never break in battle. So they can still, rust or be broken by an accident, but while fighting, it will never break, which is cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And there's even some items in here that aren't just battle or fight oriented. There's a cup made from the skull of a creature, and that
Yeah,
has certain effects. And
that
um,
one's awesome.
yeah, so I mean, there's some things in here other than just like, oh, how do we get stronger weapons? There's some ways to work these things in.
Oh, one of my favorites is the magical weapon, the Bone Smasher,
Oh yeah,
where making a giant warhammer, having the powdered bone of powdered stegodon bone in it, makes it
yeah,
magical, and every living creature within 10 yards, other than the wielder of the hammer, must make a challenging endurance test or gain a deafened condition, and suffer D10 wounds which bypass armor but not toughness every time that the hammer kills something. It
yeah.
just
That's
has this
crazy,
big brawl come out of it.
right? Yeah, very very cool kind of thematic stuff. Yeah, and stuff for like all different types of characters. There's throttler's gloves, you know, with where you need giant ligaments,
Mm.
and so opposed string tests and similar. Only the wearer counts their size is one step larger, so it allows you to kind of grapple and brawl more effectively.
You'd be like the best
But
grappler ever because you count bigger. So like the person, whoever's against you, has to get a critical to get out of your grapple.
sure, sure, yeah.
It's like
So I mean, they've got
what?
something in here. They have something in here kind of for all different like types of play and types of characters, not just like giant warhammers or things like that. So I appreciated that as well.
Right. It's not always because Warhammer WFRP is not just like about fighting all the time, which is one reason why we love it so much. Is that it
Right.
really focuses on the RP and having all these different cool items from these monsters. Again, like you were saying before, gives you a reason to go track them down. To put
Mm-hmm.
them into your campaign. Why else are you going to go after a Great Taurus that's going to destroy your party? Well, it's got some really valuable alchemical reagents that maybe someone in your party can use, or you can take it to somebody that knows how to use it, or just sell the pieces. And it'd be a really cool encounter because Great Taurus are awesome.
Yeah, the thing was kind of terrifying looking for sure.
Right. So I was gonna. One of the next things I want to talk about was what is your favorite entry from the book? I think Great Taurus might be mine just because it looks awesome. So it's a big red bowl. The image in the book is black and white. It's one of Eric's drawings, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a big red, bright red bowl. It's an enormous creature. So we're talking, but we got average is like human size, and then large would be like ogres and trolls, and then enormous would be like giants and chimeras. And now we've got the Great Taurus, and I love this thing. It can breathe fire. That was one that it can just do it. It's got big like bat-like wings, so it can fly.
Right.
And it's like super hot. I love that it's got this rule where if you attack it with any non-magical weapon, it just takes half damage. Or sorry, it doubles its toughness bonus from 5 to
Oh
10.
yeah.
So you're
Uh-huh.
basically, if you have a mundane weapon, you're just going to do 1 damage to it every time you hit it, almost certainly.
I think for me, I mean, all of these monsters are actually pretty amazing. But I think as I was scrolling through, the one that caught my eye was the Il Potente Garnaccio. It's like basically a giant crab that has like a stone tower and a boat kind of like resting on its back. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
one
So
of those
like
like
he's
decorator crabs.
so he's like specific shoot, what's it called? Leviathan.
Like a, right. So, and I guess that brings me to one of the other things that I really liked about this book is that for most of the entries of like the larger kind of more epic creatures, they have a unique version of it. There's only one of them, and this is it. So, like for the Leviathan, the Il Potente Garnaccio, that's the unique version, and it's got better stats. It has different abilities that are slightly better than the base monster, and it's something you could throw in there that a rumor about this particular creature that has a name, and that's the other thing is like most of these unique items, um, they have a name or a title. Like for the Wildcats, there's the War Lion of Staris, Trace,
Trace, yeah.
and certain things like that. So you can throw it instead of just we're fighting another creature. This one is one of renown. It's the only one. Once you kill it, it's gone
I do really like that inclusion. So it's like, oh, you've already fought a Razor Gore, but have you fought old Gribbleback?
Right.
So it's like, or it could be like, okay, in a different campaign, there was a Razor Gore, but or they encounter another one, and the party is like, oh, we know what the players might be like, oh, I know what's up. I fought this before, and then it's different. It's not what you're expecting because it's this specific one that has slightly different traits. Often they're bigger. A lot of the named
Right.
ones, instead of being enormous, they're monstrous or whatever, and they have different traits and special rules and a lot of unique stuff about them. And I think that's really cool. Some people might complain that that kind of just artificially increases the count they can say that different monsters they had in it, but at the same time, it is a different monster, so sure.
Right. Well, I think it also gives you tips on how to customize by adding traits or increasing stats. You know, it adds as kind of a tool for GMs on like, okay, well, you know, this creature doesn't have a unique one, or you take something from the base bestiary from the core book. Well, I want to make this like a unique monster. So you know, take a look at some of the entries in the book and say, okay, well, this is what they did. They increased this stat by this much. This ability, the armor is increased, or the size is increased, or whatever. Then you can apply that you know, as a tool to the rest of the game, really.
Right. And that's something I've always loved about how they set up their bestiary anyway, even in the core book, where they always had that little options at the bottom. So, like, not every monster of this type is going to be the same. Here's little things you can do to change it, mix it up, keep your players guessing. Oh, this one has a breath attack. What?
Right, right. You know, or you know, the ones that carry disease or whatnot. They think they know what's going on, and then all of a sudden they're testing endurance for some kind of deadly
Oh,
disease.
yeah, that one was great. That's a hallucinogenic effect. But it's going to test endurance because it's actually a poison, not a mind affecting thing. What? That's
Right.
awesome.
Exactly. Uh, I think the other one that we can't not mention is the Skin Wolf. Uh, that one is amazing. The art,
So good.
the lore behind it, is just awesome.
It was something we
So
were talking about in the Discord the other day, and I was like, "Oh man, this skin was so awesome! Look at this artwork from it." And I think it was Tom who was like, "Oh yeah, that's also reused. That's from the like the Warhammerpedia page about it." And it was like, "All right, it's still cool." And he was like, "But it's still awesome looking."
right. Well, and then even in that entry, they introduce a new cult that kind of worships or reveres these creatures or tries to create more. Like their goal is to become one. So now there's another you know adventure hook that you can bring
Mm-hmm.
in this wayward moon cult.
So that leads
So
really well into the next point I wanted to talk about was as a GM, what are you seeing as the practical uses for this book once you've read through it and enjoyed the story that it tells and read about these cool monsters? How are you going to use this book as a GM at your table?
I mean, I think for me the new traits for sure. Like I said, the unique monster just kind of giving me like tips on how to increase the difficulty or create kind of unique monsters. I really like that idea, and ultimately, like everything in the appendices is gold. Like
Yeah.
there's no way you cannot pull something out of the appendix with the new rules for harvesting or creating, you know, alchemical reagents for creating weapons, armor. All that stuff is.
And there's a big new list of poisons and potions and unguents that you
Mhm.
can make or potentially buy, just adding more options to that. Because I know there was some not fervor, but some people are a little upset that there was a apothecary career and things like that in the core book, but there was no alchemist,
Mhm.
which I feel like I read somewhere on like a Q&A that Cubicle 7 did, and they said, well, really, you could play a metal wizard and be an alchemist at the same time because they can get access to lore alchemy and things like that. So
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised they didn't have like an alchemist career here. It seems like it
Yeah.
would have been a perfect spot for it, but
There
oh,
there was no new career in this book, which given the contents of it and the harvesting rules and everything else, seemed a little strange, especially like in the very beginning. Their contact with their patron, this group, is a bounty hunter, and they specifically say that she's a bounty hunter turned kind of monster hunter because she gets better money. So it almost seems like that was a perfect opportunity to create a kind of a monster hunter career. That's sort of
Right.
she was the bounty hunter.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It would have been nice to see a monster hunter and alchemist careers in here, but it's not. So I don't want to dwell on it too long.
Yeah, no, and I think in a lot of ways, those are just kind of a new way. It's like an idea of saying, okay, well, you could be a bounty hunter, but you don't have to just go after, bandits. Like, you can use the bounty hunter career as is and play it this way. So,
Right.
in that way, it doesn't need to be unique. I don't think. It takes a little bit more creativity on the player's part and the GM's part to apply it that way, but it's certainly kind of implied, if not overt.
I see that as a good thing, though, and
Yeah.
encouraging that creativity. Well, like on a little bit of a spoiler, people aren't totally caught up with the Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure. Mina's, aspiring to become a witch hunter, but not so much a witch hunter as like a demon hunter or like a
Mm-hmm.
beastman hunter kind of thing. She's using that
Sure.
career to explain her hatred of chaos that way, where she doesn't really care about magic users unless they're like obviously using their magic in a bad way, like summoning demons or something like that. So I like that idea of kind of repurposing a
Mm-hmm.
career to fit what you
Well,
want to do.
I think in regards to that, if you're not caught up on Gapapa, like why? Like, what are you doing in your life?
Yeah, it's only like 90. What just came out? 91.
I think so. Yeah.
Unless you're a patron, then you've got 92. Like that's only like
No,
you know, well over 100 hours of content.
for sure. Definitely well worth the investment of time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
But yeah, I see so much use from this book. Potential use from this book. There's so much out of here. Even the fact that you could just turn this, that you could make this a campaign book if you wanted to. It
Oh
wouldn't
yeah, for
take
sure.
that much work. Where you could either use the pre-gens and just play through their story, and just obviously don't have your players read through the book, but he basically Schreiber in his just going through the different monsters, all the little excerpts and everything, essentially tells you what they do. They go to Caracadron, they go over to the Grey Mountains, they go down to Tilia.
Hmm.
You could turn this into a campaign with minimal work. Basically, you're just be coming up with NPCs
Right.
and filling that
And
part in.
I think the other use of this book is in the kind of the subtlety of it. So, like under the amoeba entry, they say that there's a lot of dwarves who will use amoebas like trapped in these glass cages to clean off artifacts to bring them back to their original luster. So I mean, you could play a scenario of a dwarf, runesmith looking for a small young amoeba alive. It has to come back alive. And then even in the next entry, the amphispina, uh,
I
they
don't know.
say that they hate bog octopus, and
I love that
so
little
like
bit.
yeah, so like people in the surrounding area who have one of these are actually like they frown upon you killing this creature because it protects them from these bog octopus
And then people,
from just being there.
yeah, because people generally see the bog octopus as worse. I think my
Yeah.
favorite little tidbit like that is the Chimera entry, where they're talking about people are fighting a Chimera trying to rid it from their lands, and then it just flees because somebody had a pet stoat with them that like fell out of their pocket. And the
Mhm.
cockatrices actually have the rule afraid weasels. What? Is
Well,
this
and it's funny.
giant bird
I
monster that can turn things to stone and it's scared of weasels?
So the cool thing about that is that in kind of like ancient cockatrice lore, from the Middle Ages, um, stoats, weasels were said to be one of the few creatures that could actually kill a cockatrice, and so it's kind of cool that they included that in a subtle way into the actual lore of the monster in the game, including like real life lore as well. So
Well, it's just so many of these things are clearly taken from our our world's mythology and then kind of Warhammerized. So I really appreciate when they include those things that not everybody's gonna know. No, not everybody knows the our real world lore about the cockatrice, and other
Mm-hmm.
than I think anybody that spent any time with fantasy knows the idea of the cockatrice is a big bird-looking thing that can turn you to stone. But including that little tidbit from whatever culture's lore it is, I don't know off the top of my head, that they're afraid of weasels is like it's so great, and I love
Yeah.
that they included that. And because to me, Warhammer is always like one part horror, awful world, other part goofy humor, and finding
Mm-hmm.
that balance to fit that. And I feel like this book did a nice job with that, especially with the encounter on the cover with the giant that he just wants good drink. He's not
Right.
evil. He and his entry says he's a giant, and then in parentheses spy.
Right. Right.
As long as you
I
could
saw that
pay
and I
him
was
in
like,
barrels of oil, I almost said oil, barrels of ale of some kind,
yeah.
he's a good guy.
Well, and I think that's another one of the stories in the book is of the group that is observing the griffin, who's defending, patrolling around its nest, and then it goes to lay an egg, and it turns out the Skaven come and attack it, trying to capture it, and they go and they free it, and then it like comes back later and acknowledges them. So like, it realized there's a lot of these monsters are kind of given the ability to not just be complete animals, monsters, beasts, whatever you want to call it. They actually have some intelligence.
Yeah, I appreciate
There's
that.
even an alternate, unique creature for the amoeba that actually has human intelligence.
It has like deals with people, like you bring me this stuff and I won't just eat you whole.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
What was that one? That had a great name. Oh, Jetsam the Clever Jelly.
Yes.
I love the things they come up with for like the names and whatnot. It's so good. Oh man. But yeah, I mean, just the idea reading through this, and I was like, I kind of want to write the campaign for the Imperial Zoo now and play through this. It's super
Right.
cool. I love how they turned into a story. You know, the Old World Bestiary for second edition of WFRP was a huge, like, critical success. It won a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
awards and everything. It was a fantastic book, and I feel like the Imperial Zoo here was like, hold my beer kind of thing, where it was
Right.
like this is like the spiritual successor to that idea. I swear this mug just has tea in it for my voice, but um,
Well, yeah, I think it's almost impossible to discuss a bestiary, a great bestiary, without mentioning second edition Warhammer's bestiary. It was kind of groundbreaking. It's kind of uh,
I love that book.
regarded by even people that don't play Warhammer as being one of the best written bestiaries out there. And I have to say that this, while not being a one for one translation, which I appreciate, definitely took a lot of inspiration. I think from that the way that was done.
Yes, for
So
sure. And like yeah, like you say, it's not for one. They didn't try to just copy it, but they did their own thing
yeah,
with it, and it worked really well. And I like the story they tell too. It's pretty. I don't want to say typical Warhammer, but it fits so well in the Warhammer lore. What happens with
mm-hmm.
Schreiber and his group? I would love to see like a novelization of it. Even honestly,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a
It'd
cool
make a great
story.
story.
Maybe I'll send some samples over to GW and see if I can write the novelization for them.
There you go.
Or
That'd be cool.
we'll do the official actual play of it. I'll make the campaign
That'd be
down the
awesome.
line. But overall, this book, yes, even if you're not playing the game right now, get it for the artwork, for the story, for
Mm-hmm.
inspiration, for this or really any fantasy RPG. It has so many different ideas, and it's like, oh, I like this monster. I can convert it to this game that I play. Like a lot of these things, if they're not already in something like Pathfinder, really easy to just take that inspiration and turn
Yeah,
it into that. So I would say,
absolutely. Even if all you do is just take some of these creature traits, abilities, and kind of inject them as a special ability into another D&D or Pathfinder. Any of those games, they kind of use those rules for like sort of unique attacks, unique abilities. You could just slide it right in almost seamlessly into another creature that's kind of similar, and go from there.
Yeah. And I don't want to sound too fanboy-y, but I'm absolutely loving what Cubicle 7 has been doing. I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay for a long time now. I think they're just nailing it so far.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a must-buy if you're running the game. If you're playing the game if you're doing as a player, I think the appendices are super useful. This is clearly more of a GM buy. There's not as many player options, which I kind of wish we had a little bit more there with like extra careers. But the alchemy and stuff is super awesome, super useful. If you're on the fence about this book, don't be. Pre-order it right now because it's so good. Actually, I haven't looked at the price difference between the regular and the collector's edition, but I'm especially after reading
$20 or $30. I think it's like $69 or $79.
as I'm very much considering getting the collector's edition just because of the way it's written is that you're supposed to be the book you have is the book that Schreiber made. So having that in world creation for the practical part of it, where it's got that faux leather cover and whatnot, and the pages are a little bit different. There's a whole list on their site of how the collector's edition is different, and it sounds, I don't know. Part of me hates to change, the spine of books on the shelf. There's one that's different, but I feel like it might be worth it for this. I think they nailed it with this book. I know some people will complain there aren't enough monsters in it, but their promotional stuff says there's over 60, which is a lot for Warhammer.
Yeah.
If people are looking for like a Pathfinder bestiary with 300 monsters in it, this is not that.
No.
But this is Warhammer. This game isn't about, one or two combats per session, right? These monsters, you don't want to fight.
The monster combats, especially for the monsters presented in this book, are like the end of the campaign. These are your boss fight monsters, kind of.
A lot of them,
for the most part. Yeah, I mean, there's a few kind of, but uh, they've got the dragons. They've got these kind of bigger monsters that you wouldn't really necessarily throw in for just a random encounter.
Oh no, not unless you really want to be a jerk.
And there are there's additional rules for some more depth into the Skaven. There's a little bit. There's a little bit of goblins. There's a little, so there are some like kind of little filler bits in here that would be for like smaller encounters. But I think really the intent here is for like these are the goal of the campaign is to get whatever the Great Taurus, the Fen Worm, the whatever. These monsters are not your average encounter monster. These are the goal.
Because a lot of them are party maiming monsters. Somebody's gonna lose an arm or, have a broken leg or whatever. And they have. I like how they fit that into the story. Like this person, broke their leg and had to get surgery, and they weren't gonna be able to like really use it for a month. So we just hung out in this town for a long time and became like local celebrities. I thought that was great.
The author character lost the ring finger and pinky finger off of their left hand, and he was talking about how he was glad that it wasn't off of his right hand because he writes and holds his sword in that hand. So,
yeah, that was like, to me, I was reading through, that was like the high point of the book when they're talking about that particular encounter and how they explained it a couple different ways, where like one of it was like the account from the Kislevites pit fighter that someone else has to write for him because he's illiterate, which is so Warhammer. So he's like explaining what happened, and then the like regular text throughout from Schreiber kind of saying sort of what happened and how they recovered from that. And that seemed so perfectly Warhammer to me that it's like in like a D&D game, maybe somebody might die in an encounter like that, but no one's going to walk away with a broken leg because that's just not how that game plays. So I like how they really fit that into the world and into the game, the way the mechanics of this game work as well.
Absolutely.
I love this book. I think it's great. I was excited for it to come out. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect. It wasn't what I was expecting, but I love it.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate takeaway that I had is that it didn't in no way did it kind of like encompass any of the things that I was expecting. And and in no way am I disappointed by that at the same time. Yeah.
For sure. Well, thank you so much, Adam, for joining me.
Yeah.
I'll talk a little bit about what else if you like what we're doing here, check out everything else from the Professional Casual Network. I have the bottom of the screen there. Check professionalcasual.com, where we have stuff most days of the week.
Mm-hmm.
Not really in the weekends, but starting on Mondays, we have the Lost Omens podcast, where Dani runs us through the Extinction Curse adventure path for Pathfinder, the second edition, which is a blast. God, we have so much fun with that game. Love that show to pieces. Monday nights on the Twitch here, we have, the Power Phase, where we play Marvel Crisis Protocol, which is my favorite miniatures game ever. And I've been playing miniatures games for like 20 years. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out Marvel Crisis Protocol. It's fantastic. I love it so much. Thanks again, Dagna, for the Modagna.
Oh yeah.
Love that guy. And then Tuesdays, we have Lost Omens video version up on the YouTube. It's about a year delay there, but if you want to watch us play Pathfinder on the YouTube, it's there as well. And we have the podcast version of our show, Wait, Did I Roll a Wild? Which is our Marvel Crisis Protocol Pavlog, as Charlie has coined, where we talk about Marvel Crisis Protocol. If I can talk, would help. We talk about news, we talk about the games played, we talk about all kinds of cool stuff, hobby stuff, show off painted models. Wednesday is our Patreon day. We have a bunch of different stuff. We have every other week, we have the Settling the Southlands campaign, my homebrew WFRP 4th edition campaign where the party went down to the Southlands trying to establish an Imperial colony, quickly learning that there are already a bunch of people there and they're not doing anything new. But it's a blast. Players are awesome in that. I've been loving that game so much. Opposite that, we have PCN original NPCs and monsters, both for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Pathfinder 2nd Edition. We've had things like characters. We're trying to focus on characters and things that we brought into the campaigns we've been playing, like Herman the Witch Hunter has become Mina's mentor and Lucky's source of terror. We've had, I believe this coming week is Trudy, everybody's favorite. Not sure why she's with him, but Bruno's wife. We have original artwork for it, her stats, and all that kind of stuff. For Pathfinder,
Is she gonna have the trait stage 5 clinger?
Yeah, right. We might learn a little bit more about Trudy and why she is so enamored with Bruno when nobody else can understand it. We've had original monsters there too. I've got a couple ones that should be coming out relatively soon. One's a big tree. That's all I'm going to say for that one for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, which I'm just glad this book didn't have anything like it. Made me happy. We'll also be having a new Patreon only Pathfinder show coming out soon called Lost Omens Podcast Presents The Slithering. We'll be playing through the deluxe adventure The Slithering with all new characters and whatnot. That's been super fun as well, super dangerous. Thursdays is my favorite day of the week when a Grim Podcast of Perilous Adventure comes out, which of course is our playthrough of the phenomenal The Enemy Within campaign. We are currently a good portion of the way through Death on the Reich. I don't want to give away too much if people haven't started listening to that yet, but I highly recommend it. I love it. We recorded some last night, and I was sad that we only did one episode because I didn't have much of a voice after an hour and a half of recording. And then Fridays, we have Tim and Chuck talk about anything and everything on Elite 8 Showdown, where they set up a bracket of who knows what. I think last week was like the most romantic thing ever. They like to do deep dives into video games, like the best cult classics of like the PlayStation and the Nintendo 64, and then what's the best Nintendo 64 game. They talk about fast food a lot, like what's the best seasonal or discontinued item at Burger King. It's all kinds of stuff. I believe this week, the most recent one was the new Olympic sport. They were going to kick something. I think they were going to kick out curling and add a new Olympic sport. I haven't got to listening to that one yet, but they come up with some crazy stuff. I think the last one was a new Summer Olympic sport last year, whenever the last Summer Olympics were, and I believe it was Demolition Derby was the new one they voted in. But for all that stuff, you follow us on Facebook. Look up Professional Casual there. We post all kinds of stuff all the time, letting people know what's coming out. Follow us on Instagram, which is not on my paper there. Oh, there it is, The Professional Casual on Instagram. Facebook is facebook.com/professional casual. Of course, professionalcasual.com. And all kinds of bonus stuff on the Patreon, patreon.com/professional casual. You get access to the video, to all our pods, and episodes a week early. Those NPCs and monsters. We have the higher tiers. We got like Dani's doing monthly meetups in the Discord to have video chat with a bunch of people from the network, and we have the new King Ding Doppeldonger tier, which you'll be able to play games with us, do tabletop RPGs with us every 6 months, which is super exciting, super fun, and it's just a great time. You got anything going on, Dagny, you want to plug? Go to your work, get food.
I would say nothing necessarily for me to plug myself, but I will say if you're not a patron of these guys, I would highly encourage you to. Everything that they do that's kind of in the Patreon umbrella is great, just as good or even better perhaps than the free stuff. And you can come in and chat with us in the Discord. We're a bunch of just regular guys and having fun, just talking about whatever. So,
how did I forget to mention the Discord? Any tier of the Patreon or subbing on the Twitch gets you access to the Discord, and it's like the most wholesome nerd place I've ever been in. Like, it is not like the usual toxicity that comes with a lot of nerd groups is just not there. Mm-hmm. We can even talk about Star Wars civilly. It's crazy. Right? Like, yeah. People have very strong opinions about Star Wars, but it never turns into like a big fight on the Discord. It's crazy. Some people come in and they're like, I think Last Jedi is the best Star Wars movie ever. And other people are like, all right, hold up. You're wrong, but let's talk about it. And other people are like, well, I like the prequels.
And they're wrong, but...
But we always talk about it civilly, and everybody is understanding that everybody's here in the Discord to have a good time, and we can talk about opinions without getting mad, and it's great that we have...
greatly appreciate the fact that while there's a lot of strong opinions, there's not a lot of those hot button politics and whatnot that doesn't set people off. Like, we keep it nerd, we keep it whatever property that you could possibly want. There's a channel that we talk about it in. And
oh yeah.
About it. But again, without it turning weird and toxic.
Absolutely. I think there was one time like a year ago that I had to step in for just a second. I was like, hey guys, let's just not talk about politics stuff here, because that just gets people pissed off, and we don't want to deal with that. And everybody was like, okay, we won't do that. Cool. So cool. It's a nice space for that kind of stuff. And if you want a new channel about something, if there's not one, Tim has it up in moments as long as he's not busy.
Yeah, absolutely.
We even have a Team Rocket PokeChat channel where people mostly just share weird Pokemon memes.
Right? Exactly.
But yeah, so awesome. Thanks for joining, Adam. Thanks everybody joining here live or on the YouTube, or I think I'll even put this on the Patreon, the free RSS feed, so people can listen to it as a podcast version. Either way you're listening to it, thank you so much for listening, for supporting. Patrons, extra thank you, and make sure to check out everything else we have at the Professional Casual Network. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Where's my button? Stop streaming. There it is.